Grace and peace be unto you. This is your brother Yehuda Judah, and I decided to do a quick lesson concerning the second return and the final return. So what I want to do now, because there is a lot of confusion concerning Isaiah 11, right? Isaiah 11. So I just want to clear up some things right here in Isaiah 11. So the first thing I want to do is go to Ezekiel, right? The book of Ezekiel, because there are still many people, right, who believe that Isaiah 11 is a future prophecy in which Isaiah 11 already happened. Isaiah 11 already took place, right? So what I want to do first is go to the book of Ezekiel, and let's deal with the final the final redemption of the house of Israel, right? The final redemption, or the final return, led by the Messiah after the Gog Magog war, right? So after the Gog and Magog war, Christ is going to return all 12 tribes. I'm not going to read everything, but you can read Ezekiel 39. That's dealing with the prophecy against Gog and Magog, or the Magog war. The Magog war is a future prophecy, right? So what I'm going to do is just start right here and kind of scam through the verses here in Ezekiel chapter 40 and verse 21. Now this is after the Gog Magog war and after all the dead bodies are buried, etc. And this is a future prophecy. This is when Christ returns and he is going to gather all the children of Israel. Verse 21. And I will set my glory among the heathen, and all the heathen, they shall see, okay, they shall see my judgment that I have executed, and my hand that I have laid upon them. Verse 22. So the house of Israel shall know that I am the Lord their God from that day forward. Verse 23. And the heathen shall know that the house of Israel went into captivity for their iniquity, because they trespassed against me. And therefore I hid my face from them, and gave them into the land, or the hand of their enemies, so they fell all by the sword. So fell they all by the sword. So the house of Israel went into captivity. This is speaking about the captivity from the Babylonian captivity, not the Babylonian captivity, from the Roman captivity, right? From the Roman captivity to the sub-Saharan slave trade in East Africa to the West African slave trade. So this is speaking about the Roman captivity to the African continent captivity, right? In which ancient Canaan is really part of Africa. Verse 24. According to their uncleanness and according to their transgressions have I done unto them, and I hid my face from them. God said he hid his face from his children, Israel, right? Verse 25. Therefore, God says, therefore, thus says the Lord, now I will bring again the captivity of Jacob, and have mercy upon the whole house of Israel, and will be jealous for my holy name. So God said he's going to bring back the captivity of Jacob, meaning all 12 tribes, and have mercy, he says, upon the whole house. Not just Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. The whole house went into captivity, right? So all 12 tribes went on cargo ships. Let's jump down to verse 28 and 29. It says here, and then shall they know that I am the Lord their God, which caused them to be led into captivity among the heathen. But I have gathered them unto their own land, and have left. Here's the key right here. Here is the key. God says Christ is going to return all 12 tribes from the captivity, the whole house, right? But here's the key sentence right here. The key sentence. It says in Ezekiel 40 and 28, it says, and have left none of them any more there. Meaning this here, when Christ returned all 12 tribes, right? There will be no more Hebrews left in any other country on the earth. Let me repeat that one more time. When Christ returned, the whole house, all 12 tribes, there will be no more Hebrews or Israelites or Jews dwelling in any other country on the earth except in the homeland. He's not going to leave no more Hebrews behind in no other nation on the planet earth. Now, that is crystal clear, right? Crystal clear. Now, let's go to Isaiah 11. This is where the confusion come at. So what I just read in Ezekiel 40, that is the final return. Now we are going to get the second return. Many people, they take these Isaiah 11 to be the final return. I just read to you the final return. When Christ returns, all 12 tribes. And he says he's not going to leave no more Jews or Hebrews in any other country on the planet. So Isaiah 11 is the second return. This happened during the Babylonian and the Persian captivity. This is when the Jews returned after the captivity of the Persians and the Babylonian captivity. This is when Ezra and Nehemiah and Zerubbabel led the Jews back to rebuild the second temple. This is what Isaiah 11 is speaking about. I just read to you in Ezekiel the final return. This here in Isaiah 11 is the second return. That's why God says a second time. Let's read it. Verse 10. Isaiah 11, verse 10. It says, and in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, meaning Christ will come on the scene, which shall stand for an ensign of the people. To it shall the Gentiles seek. Right? They say they shall seek, and his rest shall be glorious. Verse 11. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time. It says the second time. The reason why it says the second time is because Moses led the Jews out of Egypt the first time. Moses led the redemption of the house of Israel out of Egypt the first time. That's why God says in Isaiah 11:11, he says that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time. The second time is when the Jews return after the Babylonian and Persian captivity. So now you know Isaiah 11 is not speaking about the final return that's mentioned in the book of Ezekiel. Christ is going to return the whole house, as I just read in Ezekiel chapter 40. So it says again, the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria. Assyria, the Jews were in captivity in Assyria, and it says, and from Egypt, and from Patros, which is also near Cush, and from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, that's above the Euphrates, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. The islands of the sea is speaking about the Mediterranean Sea. Verse 12 is, here is the confusion right here. Verse 12. And it shall come to pass, remember now, I just read in the book of Ezekiel, that is the final return. Isaiah 11, right? Verses 11 and 12 is the second return after the Babylonian and Persian captivity, right? Verse 12 is the confusion. Now, Isaiah 11 is speaking about the return of the captivity, the Babylonian and the Persian captivity. So Isaiah 11 and 12, it is speaking about both the tribe of Judah and the northern kingdom returning after the captivity, led by Zerubbabel first to go back and rebuild the temple, and then Ezra and Nehemiah. So verse 12 says, and he, meaning God, shall set up an ensign for the nations and shall assemble the outcast of Israel, okay, shall assemble the outcast of Israel, meaning the quote unquote northern kingdom, and gather. It says the outcasts of Israel and gather together. These are the key words. And gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. It says gather together, meaning Israel and Judah from the four corners of the earth. So Israel and Judah return. You have to read this sentence very carefully. Let me read it one more time. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcast of Israel and gather the dispersed of Judah. Both, it says both from the four corners of the earth. So when it says the four corners of the earth, it is not speaking about the entire planet. I just read to you in Ezekiel 40 that Christ is going to return all 12 tribes from the captivity, right? And that will be the final return, because it says that Christ is not going to leave any more Hebrews in any more countries on the planet. So this is the second return. This already happened. So when it says the four corners of the earth, it's not speaking about the entire planet. Let's now go and get a few precepts to show you it is not speaking about the entire planet when it says the four corners of the earth. Let's get a precept. This is Isaiah 41. Let's go to Isaiah 41, right? Isaiah 41, and read verses 9 and 10. So when it says in the second return that already took place after the Babylonian and the Persian captivity, it says the four corners of the earth, meaning this here. It's not speaking about the entire planet. It's a metaphor. Let's go to Isaiah 41 and read verses 9 and 10. It reads here. In fact, let's read verses 8 through 10. It says, but thou, Israel, art my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham, my friend. Thou, when I have taken from the ends of the earth, and called thee from the chief men thereof, and said unto thee, thou art my servant, I have chosen thee, and not cast thee away. It says again, but thou, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, and the seed of Abraham, my friend, thou whom I have taken from the ends of the earth. Took Jacob from the ends of the earth. So it's not speaking about the entire planet, because God did not take Jacob from the Americas all the way back to the homeland. It's a metaphor, because Jerusalem is the center of the earth. Now let's go to Ezekiel chapter 7 to get another precept. So when it says in Isaiah 11:11 or 11:12 that Israel and Judah shall return from the ends of the earth, or from the four corners of the earth after the Babylonian Persian captivity, it is not speaking about the entire planet. Now this is Ezekiel 7 and verse 2. Ezekiel 7 verse 2. It says here, also, thou son of man, thus says the Lord God unto the land of Israel, an end, the end is come upon the four corners of the land, upon the four corners of the land, the four corners of the land, right? The judgment upon Israel. This is a prophecy that already took place. Let's read it one more time. It says Ezekiel 7 verse 2. Also, thou son of man, thus says the Lord God unto the land of Israel, an end, the end is come upon the four corners of the land, the four corners of the land. Not talking about the entire planet. Let's get another one. Let's go to let's see here. Let's get one more. Let's do another one. Let's go to Jeremiah 9 and 26. The book of Jeremiah. Let's go to Jeremiah 9 and verse 26. It says the four corners of the land. Jeremiah 9 and 26. And it reads, Egypt and Judah and Edom and the children of Ammon and Moab and all that are in the utmost corners, the utmost corners. You see that? The utmost corners, meaning the four corners of the earth, that dwell in the wilderness. See, for all these nations are uncircumcised, and all the house of Israel are uncircumcised in the heart. But the key word is, it's talking about Egypt and Judah and Edom and Ammon and Moab. It says, and all that are in the utmost corners, meaning the four corners of the earth. It's not talking about the entire planet. Isaiah 11 is a prophecy that already happened. That was the second return. The second return. Let's get one more. Let's go to Jeremiah 49 verse 32. Jeremiah 49 and verse 32. It says here, and their camels shall be a booty, and the multitude of their cattle a spoil, and I have scattered into all winds, right? Israel and Judah were scattered into all winds during the Babylonian Persian captivity. It's a metaphor. Into all winds, it says, them that are in the utmost corners, meaning the four corners of the earth, as you read in Isaiah 11 and 12, and I will bring their calamity from all the sides thereof, says the Lord. Okay? The utmost corners. The utmost corners, meaning the four corners. The four corners. So when it says in Isaiah 11 and 12, I will bring again Israel and Judah from the four corners of the earth, it is speaking about from the lands of their captivity above the Euphrates. It is a metaphor. Isaiah 11 and 11 through 12 is the second redemption, the second return. The Babylonian Persian captivity, right? The first redemption is when Moses led the Jews out of Egypt. The third and final redemption is when Christ returned all 12 tribes, right? on the entire planet Earth. And he said, they will not be left in any other country on the earth, never again. He's going to return all 12 tribes from the captivity to the homeland. All you have to do is continue reading. When we read verses 13 through 16, it also let us know that this prophecy already happened. Let's read verses 13 through 16. And it says, the envy also of Ephraim shall depart, and the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off, and Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not vex Ephraim, right? Because they return together. They were oppressed together above the Euphrates, right? And the Tigris rivers, right? Verse 14. But they shall fly upon the shoulders of the Philistines toward the west. It says toward the west. When you look at the map of Babylon and Jerusalem, you can clearly see right here that Jerusalem is west. It is west of Babylon. It says, but they shall fly upon the shoulders of the Philistines toward the west. And it says, and they shall spoil them of the east together, meaning the Babylonians. And they shall lay their hand upon Edom. Where's Edom? Edom is towards the west. And Moab. Where was Moab located? Moab was located towards the west of Babylon. And the children of Ammon. Where was Ammon located? Towards the west of Babylon. Just like Jerusalem, towards the west. It says, and shall obey them. Verse 15. And the Lord shall utterly destroy the tongue of the Egyptian sea. Because when you read verse 11, it says that many Jews will return from Africa through Egypt. So it says, the Lord shall utterly destroy the tongue of the Egyptian sea, and with his mighty wind he shall shake his hand over the river. What river? And shall smite it into 7 streams, and make men go over dry shod. Make men go over dry shod, meaning on foot, on dry ground. Make men go over dry shod. Verse 16, and there shall be a highway for the remnant, the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria. That's where the Jews were in captivity. And like as it was to Israel in the day that he came up out of the land of Egypt. Moses led the Jews out of the land of Egypt. That was the first return, the first redemption. This is the second redemption. God says the same way he did when he led the Jews out of Egypt is the same way he divided the rivers in this return after the Babylonian Persian captivity. So now you know Isaiah 11 is not speaking about a future prophecy. This prophecy already happened. It already took place. So Isaiah 11 is a prophecy that already took place. Already. When it says Israel and Judah from the 4 corners of the earth. Not just Judah. Most people, they read this verse wrong. He's talking about both. So with that, I say grace and peace, shalom to everybody.